Let me back up a little. I live in one of those well-manicured, over-regulated suburban neighborhoods. You know the type. Tree-lined streets, mandatory beige mailboxes, and an HOA board that treats garden gnomes like acts of terrorism. I moved here 3 years ago. Quiet cul-de-sac in the heart of Virginia, just outside Fredericksburg. Retired early, did my time as an Army engineer, worked a few decades in the private sector, and thought I'd finally earned the right to a peaceful home. Maybe tinker in the garage, feed the squirrels. But peace and HOA don't mix, especially not with Karen, the freshly elected queen of the Architectural Review Committee. Blonde Bob, clipboard always in hand, owns 2 purebred Shih Tzus named Chardonnay and Merlot, and uses phrases like community integrity unironically. At first, it was little things. You can't store your trash bin on the left side of the garage. It has to be the right. You'll need to remove that wind chime. It's audible from the sidewalk. And of course, we noticed your grass exceeded the 3.5-inch height limit. I thought she'd run out of petty nonsense eventually. I was wrong. Now here's the thing. Every Friday night, a small group of local veterans, most of them in their 60s and 70s, gather in my backyard. We have a modest setup, fire pit, Adirondack chairs, and a few strings of amber-toned garden lights. Nothing fancy. But those lights, they're not for decoration. They're part of a therapeutic lighting system recommended by a VA counselor. Soft-spectrum red and amber bulbs, carefully placed to reduce visual triggers and help calm hypervigilance. Something many of these guys still wrestle with from tours in Iraq, Afghanistan, even Vietnam. I paid for the whole system out of pocket. Installed it myself, no flicker, no buzzing, all low voltage, 80 and HOA compliant. Well, so I thought. Turns out Karen didn't like how the lights made my yard stand out on her evening walks. She called them disruptive, said they clashed with neighborhood cohesion. Never mind the fact that 4 other houses had LED pathway lights bright enough to land a plane. So what did she do? She filed a formal violation, then scheduled a mandatory compliance hearing. Then, without warning, authorized a contractor to cut the wires. She didn't even knock on the door. I came home that evening to find my backyard dark. Not just quiet dark, hollow dark. The kind of darkness that creeps up your spine. 2 of the veterans, Tom and Mike, were already there waiting. Tom was visibly shaking. Mike's hands were clenched. No one said a word for a while. We just sat there staring at the black garden. Then Mike whispered, "This is exactly what it felt like before the shelling started." Let that sink in. A 14-hour string of lights was all that stood between some of these men and a night full of flashbacks and adrenaline spikes. Karen didn't care. She wanted her symmetry, her uniformity, her little beige utopia. Well, that's when I remembered something Karen didn't know. I still had the paperwork, permits, doctor's notes, medical necessity letters, emails, photos, even an audio recording. Because I'd had the foresight to record the last HOA meeting where Karen flat out said, "I don't care if it's for therapy, it's an eyesore." And I wasn't alone anymore. Turns out Karen had been busy ruffling more than just my feathers. There was the couple who got fined for leaving a flag up on Memorial Day past 8 p.m. The retired teacher she threatened over a non-compliant porch swing. The widow she berated for planting marigolds instead of HOA-approved azaleas. People were getting tired, and I was about to give them a reason to fight back. Now, I'm not a man who ruffles easy. I served 22 years, did 2 tours, and survived 1 engine fire over Baghdad. But you know what's harder to navigate than enemy airspace? An HOA with a president named Karen and a God complex. Let me paint the picture. After my retirement, I bought this modest ranch-style home in Maple Creek Estates. Beautiful spot, 2-car garage, backyard backing up to a green belt, in a neighborhood full of veterans, teachers, and grandparents who mostly just want peace and decent cable service. I thought I'd found heaven. Then I met Karen. At first, she seemed harmless. Overly enthusiastic, yes, but harmless. She introduced herself within hours of my moving truck arriving, handed me a printed welcome packet, and offered me banana bread with a suspiciously forced smile. That packet, by the way, 62 pages, single-spaced, HOA bylaws, architectural rules, grass height guidelines, and even a subsection titled acceptable fence colors, shades of taupe and beyond. I remember thinking, who in God's name writes 11 pages about fence paint? Answer: Karen. See, Karen wasn't just any HOA board member. She was the self-appointed architectural compliance chair, which basically means she walked around with a measuring tape and a digital level, making sure no one's flag was tilted more than 12 degrees or that holiday wreaths came down by January 2nd, 10 a.m. sharp. It didn't take long before she started circling my house like a vulture. First strike, I left my garbage can at the curb for 47 minutes after pickup. Bam, 25 hours fine. Second strike, the American flag I fly, apparently not mounted at the regulation angle, another $50. And then came the real issue, the backyard garden lights. Let me tell you what these lights really are. They're not some flashy, Instagrammable, Las Vegas-style monstrosities. They're soft, amber glow, energy-efficient LEDs strung low along the garden path, installed specifically with guidance from a VA psychologist to create a calming environment for combat veterans with PTSD. Every Friday evening, a few of us, Tom, Mike, Gloria, Marine, 1983 to 1990, and sometimes even Father Riley, would gather around the fire pit, talk, laugh, decompress. No alcohol, no loud music, no lawn karaoke, just stories, sometimes silence, and yes, those warm little lights. We called it Friday Formation. Karen called it a disturbance. She showed up uninvited one night, heels crunching over gravel like she owned the place, holding a laminated HOA notice like it was a police badge. These lights are in violation of the community aesthetic, and frankly, your gatherings are making some residents uncomfortable. Which residents? I asked. She didn't answer. I offered to walk her through the permit papers, explained the therapeutic purpose, even offered to lower the lumens further. Karen squinted at me like I just asked to paint my house lime green. Just because you were in the military doesn't mean you get to ignore the rules. That sentence stuck with me. See, Karen wasn't just enforcing rules, she was weaponizing them. She wasn't maintaining harmony, she was controlling people. And the more power she got, the bolder she became. A week after that incident, HOA members received an email from Karen proposing a new lighting harmony policy. The gist? Only white LED lights, no warmer than 3000 K, no decorative lighting in backyards visible from common areas. That described exactly one setup in the entire neighborhood, hers. She claimed it passed with a 68% vote. Later, we found out she'd collected absentee ballots door to door, pressuring elderly neighbors with talk about property values dropping and illegal electrical work. Classic manipulation. One widow down the street, Miss Evelyn, called me in tears, said Karen told her that if she didn't vote yes, she might be considered negligent if a fire happened. Evelyn's husband died in Nam. Her porch has been lit the same way since 1973. Then came the fines. I got hit with a $100 violation for non-compliant lighting. Tom got one for unpermitted gathering of more than 4 non-resident individuals. Mike, a threat of legal action for unauthorized use of a fire pit. Let that sink in. A Marine veteran fined by a suburban HOA for sitting by a fire pit. Meanwhile, Karen strutted around like a suburban Mussolini, citing bylaws nobody had ever read before. I tried appealing, wrote letters, attached medical documentation, cited the Fair Housing Act, which requires reasonable accommodation for those with disabilities. Did she care? Nope, she doubled down. One Friday, I came home to find a city code inspector in my yard. Turns out Karen had submitted a formal safety complaint, alleging I'd installed unauthorized electrical systems and that the setup posed a threat to neighboring homes. The inspector looked around, scratched his head and said, "Honestly, sir, this is one of the safest installs I've seen. Who the hell filed this?" He left without issuing a single citation. But Karen, she still fined me, $250 for bringing unpermitted personnel onto common property. I was furious, but I also knew I had something she didn't. Documentation. Every letter, every notice, every voice memo from the HOA meetings, recorded and archived. I wasn't just going to fight back. I was going to bring the whole HOA circus into the light. But I wouldn't go alone. I started talking to my neighbors. Turns out I wasn't the only one with a fat stack of HOA fines and a grudge. George, a Vietnam vet, fined for his camo-painted mailbox, installed in 1989. The Millers, cited for inappropriate seasonal decor because their Christmas lights stayed up till January 5th. Miss June, ticketed because her bird bath attracted too many pigeons. We met in secret. Yes, a secret HOA rebellion, right here in Maple Creek. We pulled our documents, talked to a real estate attorney, and contacted the Veterans Legal Institute. Because guess what? Disabling PTSD accommodations violates federal law. Karen didn't know it yet, but she'd just turned a 14-hour garden light into a full-blown civil rights issue. The night before the HOA meeting felt a little like the calm before a mission. You know it's coming. You've done your prep. You've got your team. But still, there's that tightening in your gut that never really goes away. Karen had called the meeting with one goal: to bury the lighting issue once and for all. She labeled it Lighting Policy Clarification and Enforcement Discussion, which is HOA speak for, let's make up a new rule and pretend it's always been that way. What she didn't realize was, this wasn't just about lights anymore. It was about how she had slowly turned our peaceful middle-class neighborhood into a tightly wound prison of arbitrary punishments and personal vendettas. It was about control, and she was about to lose it. Tuesday, 6 p.m. Community Center, which usually smells like Lysol and old carpet. Karen showed up early, wearing what I can only describe as her dictator chic outfit. High-waisted khakis, buttoned-up polo, HOA badge clipped to her chest like a sheriff. People started filing in. Not just the regulars, no. This time the room was packed, standing room only. Veterans, retirees, a few young couples who had stayed quiet too long. The mood? Tense. Real tense. Karen called the meeting to order like she was hosting a polite tea party. We'll begin with the lighting discussion. Mr. Taylor, you've requested time to speak? I stood up slowly, holding a 3-inch binder in one hand and a small stack of VA documentation in the other. Thank you, Karen. I'll be brief but thorough. And then I let it rip. I started with the purpose of the lighting, PTSD therapy, backed by medical recommendations. I handed out printed copies of letters from licensed therapists, explaining why ambient lighting reduces hypervigilance and helps prevent anxiety episodes. Then I laid out HOA accommodation requirements under the Fair Housing Act, including Title VIII protections. I explained how HOA boards are legally obligated to offer reasonable accommodations for residents with disabilities. Karen shifted in her seat. People murmured. Then I showed the violation notices I'd received. How Karen had fined me, despite prior notification of the light's medical use. How she had refused to engage in a reasonable dialogue, ignored the paperwork, and instead filed a false safety complaint with the city. That's when the room started turning. I paused, then turned to the crowd. How many of you have received fines that made no sense? Hands shot up. One neighbor, Mrs. Haskins, stood up, shaky but clear. I was fined $7 because my granddaughter's chalk drawings on the driveway were graffiti. A younger man in the back. We got fined for a Halloween decoration in October. Then Tom, Army vet, Purple Heart, stood up next to me. When she cut our lights, I didn't sleep for 3 nights. I sat in my living room with a flashlight and my back to the wall. That wasn't a violation of policy. That was cruelty. Karen started to speak, but someone near the door shouted, "Let him finish." I played a recording from the last HOA board meeting. Karen's voice loud and clear. I don't care if it's for therapy. It doesn't match the HOA's visual standard. Dead silence. That was the moment when the last mask cracked. Karen stood up, shaking now, not from fear, but from ego. None of this proves I did anything wrong. I followed protocol. I acted in the interest of the community. I replied calmly, you bypassed board vote on at least 3 fines. You pressured elderly residents into giving up voting rights. And you filed false reports with city inspectors. All documented. I held up the binder. And if the board won't investigate, then a federal judge might. Boom. That's when the board members, some of whom had been quiet all year, finally woke up. The treasurer, Mr. Lewis, cleared his throat. Karen, is it true you hired your nephew's electrical company to do the wire removals? She turned pale. That's not relevant. He raised an eyebrow. He submitted an invoice to the HOA fund. The room gasped. Then someone called for it. I motioned to vote on the removal of Karen from the board. and someone else seconded it. We voted right there on the spot. Final count, 42-5. Karen lost her position as HOA president that night. In the following days, things unraveled quickly. Her nephew's company, not licensed for electrical work. The funds she used to pay him came from a discretionary beautification budget she'd created without oversight. The votes she claimed in the lighting policy change? Doctored. Several residents had no idea their names were even used. The HOA board launched a formal audit. The city opened an investigation into misuse of funds and fraud. Karen lawyered up, and my lights? Reinstalled. Better, brighter, legally protected. It's funny how a string of $14 lights could spark so much change. But that's the thing about people like Karen. They count on silence. They weaponize rules, hoping no one reads them closely. They enforce control, expecting no one will push back. But the moment people stand up, even the self-proclaimed queen of the cul-de-sac can't hold on to her crown. Friday Formation is back, by the way. Even bigger now. People drop by, bring cookies, pull up a chair. The lights glow amber, just like before. Except now they shine a little brighter, because now they mean something more. Now, if this were a movie, that HOA meeting would have been the end. Credits roll, everyone claps. Karen gets booted. Neighborhood sings Kumbaya under my PTSD-friendly garden lights. But in real life, people like Karen don't go down easy. No, they go loud. 2 weeks after she was voted off the HOA board, my mailbox started overflowing again. Not with letters, no, those were coming via certified mail. I'm talking anonymous notes, weird flyers, and one particularly impressive 3-page document typed entirely in Comic Sans. One note read, "This neighborhood isn't a veterans rehab. Some of us want normalcy." Another said, "You may have won the vote, but the bylaws are forever." And then came the real kicker. A legal notice hand-delivered to my front porch in a bright red envelope. Karen was suing me. The lawsuit was filed in small claims court. The accusations? Defamation of character, public humiliation, intentional interference with HOA operations, and my personal favorite, creating a hostile environment through weaponized patriotism. I read that last part twice, thinking maybe I was hallucinating. Weaponized patriotism. Now, I'm no stranger to legalese. I've worked with government contracts, seen how paperwork can be twisted like pretzels. But this was next-level HOA nonsense. I wasn't even worried about losing. What I was worried about was the message she was sending. See, Karen didn't file this suit thinking she'd win. She filed it to scare me, to scare the neighborhood, to make everyone think, better not cross Karen or you'll end up in court too. And just like that, people started going quiet again. Friday night gatherings got smaller. Neighbors stopped waving. A few even pulled me aside and whispered, "Hey, I'm with you, but I can't afford to be dragged into court." I don't blame them. That was the point. Karen had lost power, but she still had fear, and she was going to use it. Now, I'm no lawyer, but I know one. Actually, I know 3. Remember that little veterans support group I mentioned? Yeah, it turns out one of the newer members, Rachel, just happens to be a retired JAG officer. You should have seen her face when she read Karen's claim. "This is garbage," she said, legally speaking. We drafted a formal response, filed a motion to dismiss, and just for fun, attached a little counterclaim of our own: harassment, abusive process, and retaliatory litigation. But that wasn't the real twist. The real twist came when Rachel said, "Let's not just fight this in court. Let's take it to the community." Here's what Karen didn't anticipate. People were done being afraid, and more importantly, they were watching. Rachel and I organized a Know Your HOA Rights event at the local library. We expected maybe a dozen people. 83 showed up, including one local news reporter who had just wrapped a segment on predatory HOA practices in Northern Virginia. Guess who made the headline that week? Veteran sued by HOA president after lighting dispute sparks federal rights controversy. The story caught fire. By the weekend, local veteran groups, disability advocates, and even a few political candidates were weighing in. Karen had just taken her war from the neighborhood to the public stage. And the spotlight, it was hot. Now, remember that internal audit the HOA board launched after Karen was removed? Well, guess what landed on my doorstep? Certified mail, this time, from the new HOA president. The audit report. Pages and pages of irregularities. Improper contract bidding. Fines issued without board approval. Uses of HOA funds for decorative enhancements to her own backyard, including $900 in landscape symmetry consulting fees. And yes, the illegal payment to her nephew's fake electrical company. It was all in there. And you better believe I made extra copies. One for the attorney, one for the press, one laminated. Just for fun, the day we went to court, Karen arrived in a cream pantsuit and sunglasses, like she was testifying before Congress. The judge, a no-nonsense guy in his 60s, looked over both cases. He frowned. He asked questions. He reviewed every line of her claim. After 45 minutes, he said, "Ms. Hutchins, I see no legal merit in your complaint. In fact, I find the defendant's counterclaim to have substantial weight. Your actions appear retaliatory." He didn't just dismiss her case. He sanctioned her, ordered her to pay my legal fees, and issued a formal warning about misuse of the court system. Karen walked out without saying a word. No glares, no threats, just silence, like the lights had finally gone out on her little empire. Once the lawsuit blew over, something incredible happened. People came back out. The Friday gatherings grew. Kids joined in. One neighbor brought a guitar. The HOA board voted to repeal Karen's lighting policy entirely. They even passed a new amendment. Reasonable accommodations for therapeutic outdoor setups shall not be restricted, provided safety standards are met. We called it Tom's Clause. He cried when we read it aloud. About 2 months after the court ruling, I got one more envelope, handwritten, no return address. Inside was a photo. It was my house, taken from across the street, at night. The lights glowing soft and warm, and one line scribbled in what looked like lipstick. "You think you've won. This isn't over." I stared at it for a long time. Then I laughed. Because here's the thing, Karen, it is over. You just don't know it yet. It had been 6 months since the courtroom showdown. Karen was quiet. The neighborhood was quieter. And for the first time since I moved to Maple Creek Estates, it finally felt like home. No more surprise fines. No more compliance warning notices taped to trash bins. No more HOA witch hunts disguised as policy enforcement. Just soft lights, open porches, kids playing hopscotch on sidewalks again, and veterans sitting under garden lights talking about everything but the war. But that peace, it didn't come by accident. The new HOA board, led by George, Navy vet, steady hands, zero patience for BS, did a full sweep of the past 3 years of Karen's reign. They uncovered over $11,000 in unapproved beautification spending, half of which went to her personal property. Fines issued to 34 households without a single board vote. 3 complaints from residents with disabilities who were denied accommodation. One of those residents, Miss Lillian, 84 years old, legally blind, fined $50 for cluttered porch because she had a handrail and a chair to help her sit while waiting for her son. When George read that one aloud during a town hall, even the stoic mailman teared up. The HOA responded fast. Full policy audit, automatic refund of all unlawful fines, an anonymous complaint hotline, and most importantly, a new amendment requiring board approval by majority vote for any citation, fine, or policy change. We called it the Sunlight Clause, because when you shine light on things, the rot shows. It started with small things. A shared tool shed got built near the park. Someone repainted the benches red, white, and blue. A group of high schoolers set up a community garden, named it Gloria's Greens, after our very own retired Marine who taught them to compost and curse in the same sentence. The Friday night formation grew into something we never expected. People brought lawn chairs, crock pots. One guy even dragged in a full karaoke machine. We vetoed that after 2 rounds of Freebird. But it wasn't just fun, it was healing. Tom, who hadn't slept a full night in 10 years, started napping in the afternoons. Mike, who barely spoke when I first met him, started leading group hikes. Even Karen's former allies began showing up. Quiet at first, maybe a little embarrassed, but no one judged them. This wasn't about revenge anymore. This was about reclaiming what community was supposed to mean. After the court ruling and audit, Karen kept a low profile. She resigned from her volunteer spot at the garden club. Her nephew's business disappeared overnight. Rumor had it she put her house on the market, but no offers came through. Then one Tuesday in spring, something wild happened. A neighbor forwarded me an email. Dear residents, I, Karen Hutchins, am announcing my candidacy for HOA president for the upcoming election cycle. I believe in restoring order and excellence. You read that right. Karen was running again. We thought it was a joke. It wasn't. Turns out, under HOA bylaws, she was legally allowed to run, as long as she wasn't under active investigation. And technically, her sanctions had expired. We didn't panic. We didn't yell. We printed out the email, taped it to the bulletin board at the community center, and wrote in red Sharpie, "Debate night this Friday, all welcome." Friday came, and the place was packed. Karen showed up in a pastel suit with printed flyers that said, "Return to respect." Our candidate, Miss June, 72, retired English teacher, fights dirty in Scrabble, and bakes lemon bars that could win awards. When the moderator asked Karen why she deserved to return to the HOA board, she launched into a rehearsed speech about standards, uniformity, and vision. Then Miss June cleared her throat and said, "You fined a blind woman for having a chair, Karen." Dead. Silence. Karen stammered, tried to pivot, brought up neighborhood values. Someone from the back yelled, "You mean the values that include spying on people's porches?" It wasn't a debate, it was an exorcism, and the people were done being haunted. The ballots came in the following Monday. The result? Miss June, 89 votes. Karen, 3. And one of those was probably her dog's. With the HOA finally in steady, sane hands, life in Maple Creek reached a level of peace we hadn't known in years. The HOA newsletter changed tone, from strict warnings to gentle reminders. The first page even had a quote. A neighborhood isn't defined by its fences, but by how often its doors open. The Friday gatherings became official. The HOA listed them as a community wellness event. We even got a small grant from the county for therapeutic outdoor programs for veterans. And those garden lights, they stayed up, better than ever. George helped wire them into a solar backup system, so even during outages, they'd keep glowing. One night, months later, I sat out back watching the sky. Tom was sipping cider. Gloria was telling war stories to a teenager who looked half interested, half awestruck. Mike leaned back and said, "You know, I used to dread coming home. Now I look forward to Friday." I didn't say anything, just looked around at the lights, the laughter, the quiet, and thought, this is what she tried to kill. And we didn't just save it, we made it better. The purpose of a homeowners association is simple. Maintain community standards so that everyone benefits. Property values stay strong, public spaces are clean, and disputes are handled fairly. But when someone like Karen twists that into a tool for personal control, suddenly rules become weapons. The HOA isn't the problem. Unchecked power is, and that power thrives when good people stay silent. So if your HOA starts handing out fines like candy or enforcing weird harmony policies that seem more about power than purpose, speak up, ask for transparency, read the bylaws, demand board votes. Because silence isn't compliance, it's surrender. Let's be clear, no one should have to explain why they need medical accommodations to some clipboard-wielding suburban tyrant. If a lighting setup helps someone sleep without flashbacks, if a handrail helps a senior stand with dignity, if a garden eases someone's anxiety after a lifetime of service, then that should be honored, not fined. This isn't just a moral thing, it's federal law. The Fair Housing Act protects reasonable accommodations for people with disabilities. And if your HOA ignores that, you have legal ground and you're not alone. Karen types operate in a pattern. 1. Quote rules to intimidate. 2. Pressure residents into silence. 3. Manipulate votes and avoid accountability. Retaliate when challenged. But what they don't expect? Community, unity, receipts. When people come together, ask questions, share stories, and stand firm, Karens fall every time. I didn't yell. I didn't break anything. I didn't threaten or shame or stoop to her level. I used paperwork, proof, community, law, and most of all, I used the truth. That's what made the difference. You don't need to shout. You just need to stand up, even quietly, even alone at first, because once the first person stands, others will follow. Not the football kind, though we've got that too. I'm talking about the kind where someone brings cookies without asking. Neighbors know each other's names. Veterans talk and laugh under string lights. People ask, "You okay?" and mean it. Kids run barefoot without fear of an HOA letter the next day. That's community. That's what wins in the end, not policies, not fear. People. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever dealt with an overreaching HOA? Know a Karen who thought they ran the block? Or maybe you stood up and saw real change? Drop it in the comments. Tell us what happened in your neighborhood. You might be surprised how many people have been through the same thing. And hey, if you made it this far in the story, give this video a like, share it with your neighbor, especially if they've got a Karen problem, and subscribe for more true stories that prove sometimes the smallest lights shine the brightest.